Well, welcome back everybody to our online program examining the strengths and limitations of the brain disease model. This is of addiction, this very popular idea that keeps appearing on television, radio, and magazines, that addiction is a matter of this drug hitting the brain and hijacking the brain so that drug use becomes a compulsion. And the person uses the drug even if they don't want to use it, even if they feel no pleasure from it. So one of the limitations of the brain disease model is that a lot of brain scientists, for example, say, no, we've looked at the brain. It's not a brain disease. It's just this thing called neuroplasticity, or the idea that the brain simply adapts to whatever's going on for it. And a sort of a learning issue, that the brain simply learns things based on this, what it has to repeatedly deal with. And so that's kind of interesting, because neuroplasticity is what evolution gave us. In fact, it's like the basis of learning, the biological basis of learning. So it's not a disease or anything bad or unnatural or aberrant or anything else. It's just what the brain does. So that's kind of an interesting one, because it seems more and more brain scientists are pointing out that maybe it's all about neuroplasticity and not about a disease in the brain. Yeah. But there's another argument that people who are expert in the brain point out, and this is a bit tricky, but it goes basically like this, is that if you want to make an argument that it's a brain disease, you have to figure out, like, what's this magical dividing line going on for the person? And the magical dividing line's got to be like, what's going on in the brain? So for example, someone who starts out, maybe they're 12 years old, steal some beer from the basement or something like that. Well, they aren't addicted. They've only had a couple of beers and they don't use it very often. But over time, they keep drinking more and more, and then at some point, then we say we're addicted. So the kicker is, how do you define that point in the human brain? Because they have to do something along the lines of, for example, diabetes. So how do you know you have diabetes? Well, the scientists have said if you have, and I could be wrong on this, but I think it's 7 millimolars of a blood glucose fasting level in your system, and then per liter, and then if you cross that line, then you're diabetic. If you have less than this number 7, then you're like not diabetic, or sometimes if you're close to it, you're pre-diabetic. But at any rate, the diabetes people have said, okay, here's the magical line you cross, and it's 7, although apparently it differs in different countries. But anyway, they've defined this sort of state of affairs in the body based on this the blood glucose level. So if you're going to make the argument in the brain that it's a brain disease, you've got to define, well, what is this disease? Like, what is it made of? Why is it that you would say someone who's 12 years old who has a couple of beers is not addicted, but that this person who's been drinking for like 20 years and drinks a liter of whiskey a day is addicted? What's the magical brain like that you can say before it wasn't addicted, but now it is? And that's a really troublesome thing, because one of the things we know about the brain is everybody's brain's different. So how do you define this place? And so a lot of very thoughtful people who are experts in the addiction field say, since the brain scientists really cannot define that point, then that means you can't actually prove it with scientifically according to brain science. And if you can't prove it scientifically according to brain science, then how do you ever make the argument that it's a disease? So it's a pretty interesting argument that really has never been addressed yet. And so, yeah, a lot of experts, for example, really are unsure whether to call it a disease based on this very fact that, frankly, we can't prove it scientifically. All right, stuff to think about. Anyway, that's it for this topic on our online program, and we'll be back next time with a new topic.